She asked if he had any conception, while her voice trembled not from fright, but from the virtuous rage that had secured her celebrity status, the specific anger that had fueled countless video snippets and millions of shares. She asked what it truly meant to exist as an immigrant within this nation at this very moment. To rise each morning in dread that one's mother, father, or offspring might be forcibly removed from their residence by weaponized agents. She demanded to know if Director Patel possessed even the slightest understanding of that sensation as she stood up. It is against protocol to stand during a congressional inquiry, as members typically pose their queries from their designated chairs. Yet Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had risen because the gravity of the situation required it. She stood because the television cameras necessitated the visual impact. This specific instance was the calculated footage meant to dominate every news cycle and trend across all digital platforms while raising significant funds before the day ended. The hearing chamber within the Rayburn building was filled to capacity, with every single chair occupied and the press section spilling over. The hashtag concerning the Patel hearing was already gaining traction globally. Her social media staff observed from her suite 3 levels above, with fingers poised over the upload keys prepared to edit and distribute the instant she delivered the final verbal blow. FBI Director Kash Patel sat quietly at the designated witness table. He was dressed in a navy suit without a necktie. His hands were clasped calmly before him on the surface. To his left rested a binder filled with thick, color-coded dividers, though he had not yet unsealed it. He had anticipated this specific inquiry not by predicting the precise phrasing, but by recognizing the behavioral pattern. He had analyzed her previous hearings in the same manner a litigator examines an opposing attorney. She invariably concluded with an emotional query designed to force the witness into a position of weakness or cruelty. In either scenario, she emerges victorious. In either scenario, the video segment achieves viral status, but on this occasion, she had committed a tactical error. She had posed a question she believed possessed no satisfactory response. She was mistaken. Patel leaned forward toward his microphone. His tone was tranquil and deliberate. It was the voice of a man who had litigated homicide trials in Miami and terrorism charges in federal courts, and who had realized long ago that lowering one's volume compels others to listen more intently. He addressed the Congresswoman, stating that his parents had emigrated to this nation from India. His father arrived carrying only a suitcase and a diploma that no institution here acknowledged. He grew up in Garden City, New York, within a residence smaller than the hearing room they currently occupied. He paused not for theatrical effect, but for accuracy. He explained that before becoming a national security prosecutor, or working at the White House, or leading the FBI, he spent his early career as a public defender in Miami-Dade County, Florida. He had represented the most destitute and defenseless individuals within the legal system. Many of those clients were immigrants. Many lacked documentation. He sat beside them in detention centers. He argued their specific cases in front of judges. He ensured they received legal counsel, because that is the mandate of the Constitution. He looked squarely at her. Therefore, yes, Congresswoman, I do have some concept of it. The atmosphere in the room altered. It did not shift theatrically like in a film. It changed in the manner a courtroom changes when a witness reveals something the jury had not anticipated and everyone silently reassesses the situation. Her mouth parted and then shut. She had been unaware that he served as a public defender. That fact was absent from her briefing materials. Her staff had prepped her to face a Trump loyalist and a conspiracy theorist who was a deep state combatant lacking valid legal credentials. No one had informed her about Miami-Dade. No one had mentioned the detention cells or the undocumented clients, or the years he spent working on the opposing side of the very system she accused him of abusing. Patel was not yet finished. He told the Congresswoman what he found intriguing. While he was in those courtrooms defending immigrants and ensuring they had attorneys and that their rights were secured through the legal process, she was broadcasting a webinar instructing them to defy federal law enforcement. She told them not to retain lawyers and not to utilize their rights through appropriate avenues, but to resist and create enough friction that agents cannot move as quickly as they desire. He allowed that quotation to resonate. He asked if she knew the result when an undocumented individual physically resists a federal agent serving a valid warrant. They receive additional criminal indictments for obstruction and resisting arrest. These charges make it exponentially more difficult for any attorney or public defender, like he used to be, to assist them. Her webinar did not shield immigrants, Congresswoman. It placed them in significantly greater legal peril. She knew that fact, or at the very least she should have known it. There was silence. It was the type of quiet that cameras adore and politicians dread. AOC stood at her designated seat. Her microphone was active. The red indicator light on her timer continued to blink. For the first instance in her congressional career, which was built on never lacking a retort, she had absolutely nothing to say. To comprehend how they arrived at this juncture, to understand how the most media-literate member of Congress walked into a hearing she designed as a spectacle and exited as the target of it, you must return 3 hours prior to the morning when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was practicing her queries before a mirror, unaware that the man she intended to interrogate had already reviewed every financial disclosure and ethics report and tweet she had ever published. It was 7:30 in the morning when she reached her office in the Longworth House Office building. Her chief of staff, Mike Casca, was waiting with coffee and a printed schedule alongside the social media metrics from the previous evening's posts. Casca remarked that engagement numbers were exceedingly high. The Instagram story regarding her preparation had garnered 2 million views. The tweet concerning holding Patel responsible had accumulated 40,000 shares. The progressive media ecosystem is ready. They are anticipating a spectacle. They will receive it. AOC replied. She took her seat at the desk and opened the file. Inside lay 5 questions, each meticulously constructed to not merely gather data. Congressional inquiries rarely produce actual information, but rather aim to manufacture a moment or a clip or a segment of content that would spread. The strategy was elementary and had succeeded on every previous occasion. Question 1 was to establish the human toll. Mention the families, mention the children. Force the witness to either admit the suffering, which makes the administration appear cruel, or dismiss it, which makes the witness appear heartless. Question 2 was to pivot toward constitutional infringements. Cite a particular legal case. An undocumented mother detained on school grounds. A father removed from a medical facility. Make the issue personal. Question 3 was to attack his professional qualifications. Patel lacks an FBI background. He is merely a political operative. State that fact while on camera. Question 4 was the lucrative moment, the emotional conclusion. The query, asking if he even views them as human beings, would become the tweet and the headline and the fundraising email. Casca reminded her that they were not there to obtain answers from Patel. They were present to obtain video clips of Patel. AOC nodded in agreement. She understood the game better than anyone else in Congress. She had created the contemporary iteration of it. Before her arrival, congressional hearings were dull affairs on C-SPAN that nobody viewed. She had transformed them into engines for viral content, and her interrogation of witnesses had produced more views than the majority of Netflix programs. She grasped framing and pacing and the pause before the final strike, and the moment to look straight into the lens rather than at the witness. Her communications director, Jared Stein, stated that Patel is a MAGA loyalist lacking genuine law enforcement experience. He claimed he obtained the position because he authored a memo for Devin Nunes and appeared on Fox News a sufficient number of times. He is going to be defensive and evasive. That is exactly what we desire. Kaska said to remember the Zuckerberg hearing. You made him sweat for 5 minutes, and the clip achieved 60 million views. It is the same strategy as Patel is essentially Zuckerberg wearing a badge. AOC smiled. She was clad in a red blazer as power colors pop on camera and wore gold earrings purchased from a small business in the Bronx that she would tag on Instagram later. Every detail was curated, including the outfit and the earrings and the folder labeled accountability in bold marker that she would carry into the hearing room visible to cameras. She had learned early on that congressional hearings are not debates but rather productions, and she was the premier producer in Congress. Her social media coordinator, Maya Torres, reviewed the posting schedule. We have a pre-hearing tweet queued for 9:45. Today, I am holding the FBI accountable for its war on immigrant families. Draft captions for clips are prepared for 3 potential scenarios. Him refusing to answer, or him getting defensive, or him saying something inflammatory. We also have the fundraising email written. The subject line reads, I just confronted the FBI director about his attacks on immigrants. He did not appreciate it. That is perfect, AOC said. What they did not know, and could not have known, because they performed the type of superficial opposition research that comes from reading headlines rather than court documents, was that Kash Patel had litigated more jury trials than every member of AOC's staff combined, that he began his career not as a Republican operative, but as a public defender representing indigent clients in one of the busiest criminal courts in America, that he had spent 3 years at the Department of Justice under Barack Obama prosecuting terrorists, that he had convicted al-Qaeda operatives in cases requiring the sort of meticulous preparation that congressional theatrics do not. They believed they were preparing to grill a political hack. They were actually preparing to cross-examine a seasoned trial lawyer. 3 blocks away, in the FBI director's office at the Hoover Building, Patel sat with his general counsel, Lauren Mitchell, and deputy director, Dan Bongino. The television was on mute, displaying the cable news preview. Every channel was broadcasting the same graphic. Patel to face intense questioning on immigration enforcement. Bongino said, she is going to go emotional first, families being torn apart and children weeping. She will have a photograph. She always possesses a photograph. Patel said then she will pivot to my qualifications. She is going to call me a political operative. She will claim I am not qualified. Mitchell added, then comes the closer. The significant emotional question designed to go viral. Patel opened his binder. It was organized with colored tabs. Blue was for AOC's public statements. Red was for the House Ethics Committee report. Green was for FEC filings and campaign finance records. Yellow was for the webinar transcript. Patel said, here is what she does not understand. She believes I am going to sit there and accept it. She thinks I am going to be defensive. Every witness she has ever questioned has been defensive because that is what happens when a camera is in your face and someone accuses you of being a monster. You flinch. You stammer. You appear guilty, even when you are innocent. He tapped the binder. But she has never cross-examined someone who has conducted cross-examinations. She is accustomed to bankers who get nervous, and tech executives who speak in jargon, and cabinet secretaries who are coached to give non-answers. She is not accustomed to someone who will let her speak and wait for her to finish before reading her own paperwork back to her. Mitchell nodded, agreeing the Ethics Committee report is the strongest asset. It was bipartisan, with 5 Democrats voting for it. She cannot dismiss it as a Republican attack job. Bongino added that the webinar transcript is the second strongest. It is her own voice and her own words. Friction and resist. You cannot spin your own words. Patel stated that the FEC filing is the closer. She built her entire brand on being clean. No corporate PAC money. It remains in her Twitter bio right now, today. And the FEC record shows nearly $1 million moved through PACs and shell companies that her chief of staff controlled. She is either lying about her brand or ignorant of her own finances. Neither option is a good look. He closed the binder. I am not going to be defensive. I am going to answer her questions completely truthfully and in detail, and every answer will include a fact about her that she does not want on camera. Bongino grinned. Judo. Patel confirmed judo. She provides the energy while I provide the direction. The hearing began at 10 o'clock. The hearing room was already at capacity 30 minutes before the gavel struck. AOC arrived through the main corridor with Clyde and Bowman flanking her while cameras flashed. She gave a brief statement to the press cluster at the door. Today, we hold this administration accountable for its war on immigrant families. She walked in like a boxer entering the ring with chin up and shoulders back, and the red blazer bright against the wood-paneled walls. The folder marked Accountability was visible to every camera in the room. Patel entered through a side door. No entourage and no statement, just a man with a binder walking to a witness table. He sat down, adjusted his microphone, and opened a bottle of water. He looked like an accountant arriving for a quarterly review. The contrast was deliberate on both sides. AOC wanted drama. Patel wanted calm. She wanted the hearing to feel like a confrontation. He wanted it to feel like an audit. Only one of them would get what they wanted. Chairman Jim Jordan called the room to order and read the opening statement. The Committee on the Judiciary will come to order. Today, we will hear testimony from FBI Director Kash Patel on the Bureau's law enforcement priorities, with particular focus on counterterrorism, cartel interdiction, and immigration enforcement. The first 90 minutes were unremarkable. Republican members asked Patel about FBI operations and arrest statistics and fentanyl seizures. Patel answered with numbers. 25,000 immigration-related arrests since January. 350 Tren de Aragua gang members. 195 MS-13 members. 66,000 kilograms of cocaine. 1,500 kilograms of fentanyl. 59 foreign intelligence operatives arrested for espionage. The numbers were impressive, but they were boring on camera, which is exactly what AOC was counting on. By the time her 5 minutes arrived, the audience would be hungry for something emotional and something human, and something that cut through the data. She would provide it. Jordan said the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from New York for 5 minutes. AOC straightened in her seat, adjusted her microphone, and looked directly at Patel. Not at the camera, not just yet. That would come later. For now, she looked at him the way a prosecutor looks at a hostile witness. Director Patel, she began, since you took over the FBI, your agency has participated in what can only be described as a mass dragnet targeting immigrant communities. ICE raids in residential neighborhoods and agents showing up at schools and parents detained in front of their children. Is this the FBI you are proud of? Patel leaned forward. Congresswoman, I appreciate the question. Let me give you some context for those operations. Since January 20th, the FBI has arrested over 25,000 individuals in connection with immigration enforcement. Of those, approximately 9,000 were flagged for violent criminal histories, including prior convictions for murder, assault, sexual offenses, and narcotics trafficking. 350 were confirmed members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan prison gang that has established operations in at least 17 American cities. 195 were MS-13. He paused. He let the numbers register. We also seized 1,500 kilograms of fentanyl during these operations. Fentanyl, as you know, kills approximately 70,000 Americans per year. 1,500 kilos is enough to kill every resident of New York City 3 times. Director Patel, I did not ask about fentanyl. You asked if I am proud of the FBI's operations. I am, because every one of those arrests represents a community that is safer. Many of those communities, I should note, are immigrant communities. The victims of Tren de Aragua are overwhelmingly Latino immigrants who came to this country legally and are now being extorted, threatened, and assaulted by a Venezuelan prison gang that entered through the southern border. The victims of fentanyl trafficking are overwhelmingly working-class Americans, including immigrants in your own district. He shifted slightly in his chair. I would also note that the FBI has arrested 59 foreign intelligence operatives since January for espionage or smuggling dangerous substances into the country. 59 foreign spies, not immigrants. Spies. There is a difference, and I would appreciate it if this committee recognized it. We are protecting the people you claim to represent, Congresswoman. The question is whether you would prefer we stopped. AOC's jaw tightened. This was not going according to script. He was not supposed to have numbers ready. He was not supposed to pivot to protecting immigrants. She needed to regain control. Director Patel, you hosted a webinar where you described your plan to, and I quote, crush violent crime. But Tom Homan, your border czar, has publicly threatened to prosecute me for conducting a Know Your Rights session for my constituents. A session where I read from the Constitution. Is this your FBI that threatens members of Congress for reading the Bill of Rights? Patel nodded slowly. I am glad you raised that webinar, Congresswoman, because I have read the transcript. Your entire transcript, not just the parts your office released, and I would like to read one passage back to you if the chairman will permit. Jordan nodded. Patel opened the yellow tab in his binder. He found the page and read in a flat, measured voice. Quote, when one of these things comes to your backyard, you can resist. And when that happens over millions of people, you generate enough friction that they cannot go as fast as they want to go. End quote. He looked up. Congresswoman, that is not reading the Constitution. The Constitution says you have the right to remain silent. It says you have the right to an attorney. It says you are protected from unreasonable searches. Those are rights, and everyone, citizen and non-citizen alike, is entitled to them. I support those rights. As a former public defender, I spent years making sure people understood those rights. But you did not read the Constitution in that webinar. You instructed millions of viewers to resist federal law enforcement. You told them to create friction. That word friction is not a constitutional term. It is a tactical term. It means physical obstruction. And when undocumented individuals follow that advice and physically resist officers executing lawful warrants, they do not gain rights. They gain criminal charges. He set the transcript down. If one of my agents conducted a seminar instructing people on how to create friction against law enforcement operations, I would terminate them. And I find it remarkable that a member of Congress who took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States is actively coaching people on how to resist the enforcement of those laws. AOC's communications director, watching from 3 floors up, texted Casca. She needs to pivot now. Casca glanced at his phone, then at AOC, but she was already pivoting. She could feel the round slipping away from her and feel the energy in the room tilting toward Patel. And she did what she always did when a line of questioning was not working. She went personal. Director Patel, let us talk about your qualifications. Before becoming FBI director, your primary experience was as a political operative for Congressman Devin Nunes. You authored a memo that was widely discredited. You promoted conspiracy theories about the Russia investigation. You have zero experience managing a law enforcement agency. How can the American people trust you to lead the FBI? She said it fast. Machine gun delivery. The style that worked on camera because it gave the witness no time to respond before the next accusation landed. But Patel did not try to answer each accusation. He waited until she was finished. He let the silence stretch for 2 full seconds, which is an eternity in a hearing room. Then he spoke. Congresswoman, since you have raised the subject of qualifications, I am happy to address it. Let me walk you through my career, since you seem to be unfamiliar with it. I graduated from law school and began my career in 2005 as a public defender in Miami-Dade County, Florida. For 3 years, I represented indigent defendants, people who could not afford attorneys. Many were immigrants. Many were undocumented. I tried jury cases ranging from murder to narcotics trafficking to complex financial fraud. In 2014, I joined the Department of Justice as a national security prosecutor under President Obama. I led investigations across multiple theaters of conflict and personally prosecuted members of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I tried those cases in federal court. I obtained convictions. I then served as senior counsel for the House Intelligence Committee, where I led the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election, an investigation that both parties agreed was necessary. I uncovered intelligence malpractice during the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation findings that were later corroborated by the Inspector General. I served as Deputy Assistant to the President on the National Security Council, where I oversaw counterterrorism operations, including the elimination of senior Al-Qaeda and ISIS leadership, and the repatriation of dozens of American hostages. He paused. Now, Congresswoman, let us discuss your career. You graduated from Boston University in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in international relations and economics. You worked as a bartender and waitress, which is honest and respectable work. In 2018, you were elected to Congress. You have never tried a case. You have never conducted a criminal investigation. You have never held a security clearance. You have never prosecuted or defended anyone in any court. I do not say this to diminish your career. You have achieved remarkable things in electoral politics. But you opened this door. You questioned my qualifications. So I am simply putting both of our resumes on the table and letting the American people decide who is qualified to discuss law enforcement. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that happens when something lands so cleanly that nobody knows how to react. AOC's face cycled through 3 emotions in rapid succession: shock, fury, and something that looked almost like recognition. The recognition that she had made a tactical error, and there was no way to undo it on camera. Chairman Jordan's face was carefully neutral, but the Republican members behind him were not as disciplined. Several were suppressing smiles. One was openly grinning. AOC regrouped. She had maybe 90 seconds left. She could feel the time draining away. Feel the 5 minutes that were supposed to be her stage collapsing into a ruin. She needed to change the subject entirely. She needed something that would put Patel back on defense. Director Patel, since you want to talk about qualifications and accountability, she said, her voice harder now. The performance abandoned real anger seeping through. Let us talk about yours. Your FBI has been accused of political persecution. You maintain a list of so-called government gangsters. You have targeted former FBI officials who investigated your boss. You have turned the Bureau into a personal instrument of revenge for Donald Trump. Is that your idea of law enforcement? Patel's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. The patience of a man who has been waiting for exactly this opening. Congresswoman, I appreciate your concern about accountability. Let me demonstrate what accountability looks like by noting a few items from the public record. Your record. He opened the red tab. July 2025. The House Ethics Committee, bipartisan 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, released its report on your attendance at the 2021 Met Gala. The committee found unanimously that you impermissibly accepted gifts in violation of House rules, standards of conduct, and federal law. Those gifts included a custom designer gown, professional hair and makeup services accessories, and a complimentary ticket for your partner. The committee found that you failed to reimburse vendors in a timely manner, and that several vendors were only paid after the investigation began and after they threatened your campaign. AOC's lawyer seated behind her started to rise. She waved him down. The dress, Patel continued, read, "Tax the Rich." You wore it at an event where tickets cost $35,000 per person. You wore a dress demanding that the wealthy pay their fair share, while accepting that dress and everything that came with it for free from the rich. The committee called your conduct inconsistent with House rules, laws, and other standards of conduct. Those are their words, not mine. The Ethics Committee found my violations were not knowing and willful. AOC started. That is correct. They did not find criminal intent. They found carelessness. They found that you relied on staff and designers to calculate fair market value, and that those calculations, quote, did not fully account for the true cost of the unique goods and services you received, which is another way of saying you accepted expensive gifts and did not bother to figure out what they were worth until someone made you. He turned a page. Shall I continue? Your former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, established 2 political action committees, Justice Democrats, PAC, and Brand New Congress, PAC, and a limited liability company, Brand New Congress, LLC. Between 2016 and 2018, those PACs transferred nearly $1 million to the LLC, which Chakrabarti owned under the description Strategic Consulting. Your campaign also paid his LLC for consulting, and his PAC, the one you sat on the board of, paid your then-boyfriend, Riley Roberts, $6,000 for marketing consulting. He let that sit. You campaigned on the slogan 100% people-funded, no corporate PAC money. That is still in your Twitter bio. Meanwhile, your chief of staff was operating what the FEC complaint described as a shadowy web of PACs and LLCs that moved nearly $1 million with minimal disclosure. The FEC investigated. 3 of 6 commissioners voted to find reason to believe violations had occurred. 3 voted against. A tie, which means 3 federal election commissioners believed your campaign broke the law. The case was closed only because the FEC could not reach a majority, not because you were cleared. And as recently as March of this year, Americans for Public Trust filed another ethics complaint about your use of taxpayer funds, specifically payments from your member representational allowance. That is the taxpayer-funded budget every member of Congress receives for official duties to a dance company and an individual labeled as training. When asked about it, you tweeted, and I quote, 100% wrong. None of this is taxpayer money. This is an FEC filing. He looked up. That statement was false, Congresswoman. The payments in question were disbursed from your MRA, your taxpayer-funded office budget, not from your campaign, not from an FEC filing. From the account, the American taxpayer funds for your official duties. You told the public it was not their money. It was. AOC's timer was blinking. She had 30 seconds left, maybe 40. Her mind was racing, scrolling through the playbook for the response, for the pivot, for the thing she could say that would rescue this moment and turn it into something she could use. She found it. The one card she always played when everything else failed. The emotional card. The immigrant card. The card that had worked every single time. Because nobody, no Republican, no Fox News host, no hearing witness had ever been able to counter it without looking like a monster. She leaned into the microphone, softened her voice, let the anger drain away, and replaced it with something that sounded like pain. Director Patel, I think it is clear what is happening here. You are using this hearing to attack me because I defend immigrant communities, because I stand with people who are afraid, because I dare to challenge this administration's cruelty. But I want to ask you one more question, and I want you to answer honestly. She paused, looked at the camera, then back at him. Do you have any idea what it is like to be an immigrant in this country right now? To wake up every morning terrified that your mother, your father, your children will be dragged out of their homes by armed men, and now we are back where we started. This was the moment she thought would save her. The viral question. The clip that would overwrite everything else. The immigrant story that nobody could counter without looking heartless. But you already know what happened. You heard it at the beginning. Patel told her about his parents, about Garden City, about Miami-Dade, about the holding cells and the indigent clients, and the years he spent defending immigrants in court while she was tending bar in the Bronx. None of it was an insult. All of it was devastating. While I was in those courtrooms defending immigrants, making sure they had lawyers, making sure their constitutional rights were protected. He said, his voice still flat, still measured, still the voice of a man reading facts into a record. You were using them as props for fundraising emails, while I was making sure undocumented defendants understood their right to counsel. You were live streaming instructions on how to resist federal law enforcement, which does not protect them. It puts them in more danger. Your webinar did not give them lawyers, Congresswoman. It told them to resist. It told them to create friction. And when an undocumented person follows that advice and resists a federal officer, they do not get protected. They get additional charges, obstruction, resisting arrest, assault on a federal officer charges that make it virtually impossible for any attorney to help them avoid deportation. I protected immigrants by defending them in court. You endangered them by telling them to fight officers carrying valid warrants, and then you fundraised on it. The timer on AOC's microphone went to 0. The red light died. Her 5 minutes were over. She sat down. She did not have a response, not because there was not one, as there is always a response in politics, but because the one she needed would have required her to know things she did not know, to have prepared for an opponent she had not studied, to have anticipated that the man sitting at the witness table was not the caricature her team had briefed her on, but a trial lawyer with a public defender's resume and a prosecutor's instinct for the jugular. Chairman Jordan waited 3 seconds, then he spoke. The gentlewoman's time has expired. Director Patel, do you have anything to add for the record? Patel straightened his papers. Just briefly, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez questioned my qualifications, my integrity, and my commitment to immigrant communities today. I answered every question she asked. I would note for the record that she did not answer any of mine. She asked me if I understand what immigrants face. I do. My parents were immigrants. I defended immigrants in court. The question I would ask her, the question she did not answer, is simpler. If you say tax the rich, why did you accept a free dress from them and not pay for it until investigators made you? If you say no corporate PAC money, why did your chief of staff funnel nearly $1 million through PACs and shell companies that he controlled? If you say you stand with immigrants, why did you tell them to resist federal officers instead of giving them lawyers? And if you say none of this is taxpayer money, why was it your taxpayer-funded office account? He closed his binder. The American people deserve representatives who practice what they preach. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is very good at asking questions. She is less good at answering them. I answered all of hers today. She is welcome to answer mine any time. He sat back. Jordan gavelled the session forward. The next member began asking questions about fentanyl seizures. The hearing continued, but the hearing was over. Everyone in the room knew it. The press gallery was already filing out. The producers in the control rooms were already cutting the clip. The social media managers were already drafting the posts. AOC sat in her chair. Rashida leaned over and whispered something. AOC shook her head. Her phone was buzzing Casca Stein the whole team, but she did not look at it. She stared straight ahead at the wall behind Patel's head, at nothing. Clyde tried again. AOC held up a hand. Not now. 3 rows behind her, Jamal Bowman sat with his arms crossed, jaw tight, watching the Republican side of the dais for any sign of gloating he could use as content. There was plenty. Several members were openly scrolling their phones, reading the real-time reactions, sharing clips that were already spreading. One staffer was literally high-fiving another in the hallway outside the open door. Bowman photographed none of it. For once, the machine had nothing to work with. In AOC's Longworth office, Maya Torres sat frozen in front of 3 screens. The first showed the C-SPAN feed still live. The second showed Twitter, where #ReceiptsDoNotLie was climbing toward the top trending spot. The third showed the draft fundraising email that was supposed to go out 10 minutes ago, still unsent. Because the subject line I just confronted the FBI director about his attacks on immigrants he did not like. It no longer matched reality. The FBI director had liked it just fine. He had liked it so much that he had turned every one of her attacks into a counterattack, and the footage was already everywhere. Torres deleted the draft, opened a new document, started typing. Today, the Trump administration's FBI director launched an unprecedented personal attack against me in a congressional hearing. She got halfway through the sentence and stopped. It was not unprecedented. He had answered her questions on camera. That was the problem. You cannot call it an attack when the other person is simply responding to your questions with facts from public records. You cannot call it persecution when the evidence he cited was from a bipartisan ethics committee with 5 Democrats on it. She closed the document and called Casca. What do we do? Casca was silent for 3 seconds. Then we do what we always do. We fundraise on it. We spin it as an attack on progressive values. We post our clips, not his. Mike, everyone has already seen his clips. Then we make better ones next time. But both of them knew in the way that political operatives know things they will never say out loud, that there was not going to be a next time with Patel. Not like this. AOC's power had always come from the asymmetry of preparation, where she prepared for performance. Her opponents, prepared for policy and performance, always won on camera. For the first time, she had faced someone who prepared for both. Someone who understood that a hearing room is a courtroom with cameras, and that the person who controls the record controls the narrative. For 4 minutes, no member of the squad posted anything on any platform. In the history of progressive social media, that silence was unprecedented. The clips went viral within the hour. Not AOC's clips, but Patel's. The first clip to break was the public defender exchange, which was 37 seconds. Patel's voice was calm and flat, saying, "While I was in those courtrooms defending immigrants, you were using them as props for fundraising emails." It hit 15 million views by dinner time. By the next morning, it was at 47 million. The second clip was the Met Gala takedown, which was 22 seconds. You wore a dress that said "Tax the Rich" at an event where tickets cost $35,000. You accepted the dress for free from the rich. Simple and brutal and memeable. Someone set it to the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme music, and it became the most shared political video of the month. The third clip was the PAC question where Patel read the numbers. Nearly $1 million through PACs and shell companies. Your Twitter bio still says no corporate PAC money. Someone screen-grabbed AOC's actual Twitter bio with the claim still there and put it next to the FEC filing side by side. The contrast did the work. AOC held a press conference 2 hours after the hearing ended. She stood in the hallway outside the Judiciary Committee room flanked by Clyde and Jamal Bowman, and gave the speech her team had prepared. "What you saw today," she said, "was a political operative using the power of the FBI to attack a woman of color who dares to hold this administration accountable. This is what fascism looks like. This is what the suppression of dissent looks like. And I will not be silenced." The words were right. The delivery was right. The framing was right. But the problem was that Patel had not mentioned her race or her gender or dissent or fascism or suppression. He had mentioned an ethics committee report, FEC filings, a webinar transcript, and a tweet. He had read her own words back to her. He had cited bipartisan findings from a committee with 5 Democrats on it. The fascism defense did not stick because the attack it was designed to counter had not been made. Progressive media tried to spin it. Patel attacks AOC in political theater. Ran the MSNBC Kiran, stating FBI director uses hearing to target progressive lawmaker. Read the Huffington Post headline. But the problem with spin is that it requires the audience to not watch the actual footage. And 47 million people had watched the actual footage. They had seen AOC ask the questions. They had seen Patel answer them. They had seen him read the Ethics Committee findings, the FEC complaint, and her own tweet about taxpayer money. They could judge for themselves. In the Bronx, the reaction was complicated. AOC's district, New York's 14th covering parts of the Bronx and Queens, is one of the most diverse in the country. It includes large immigrant communities, working-class families, small business owners, and the kind of people who work 60-hour weeks and do not have time for Twitter wars. A local news crew stopped at a bodega on Westchester Avenue. The owner, a Dominican woman named Carmen, who had lived in the Bronx for 31 years, gave an interview that was shorter and more devastating than anything said in the hearing room. "She wore a dress that cost more than my rent for a year," Carmen said. "A dress that says 'tax the rich,' and she did not even pay for it. She tells me she is fighting for me. But who is fighting for me when my rent goes up and she is at a party with celebrities? I voted for her 3 times. I am not sure about a 4th. A young Ecuadorian man who worked at a car wash 2 blocks away was more direct. She told people to resist. My cousin followed that advice. Resisted. Got charged with obstruction. Now he cannot get asylum because he has a criminal charge. Thanks to her advice, she was trying to get views on Facebook. My cousin is trying to not get deported." A retired public school teacher named Dolores, who had canvassed for AOC in 2018, said, "I still believe in what she stands for, but there is a difference between what you stand for and what you do. She stands for the working class, but she goes to the Met Gala and takes free dresses and does not pay the designers on time. Those designers are working people too. Where was the solidarity? It was not anger. It was the particular exhaustion of working-class voters who had believed the story and were starting to notice the footnotes. The polls moved. Not dramatically. They never do after a single hearing. But the internal numbers that both parties watch closely showed something that alarmed Democrats more than any headline. AOC's favorability among working-class Latino voters in her district dropped 4 points in a week. Not because they had suddenly become Republicans, because they had seen the Met Gala dress and the Ethics Committee finding and the PAC money and the dance company payment, and they had done the math that working people always do. She says she is one of us, but she acts like she is one of them. Moderate Democrats who had long been wary of AOC's influence on the party's brand began to distance themselves quietly. No public statements, no dramatic breaks, just a subtle shift in the invitations that did not come, the joint press conferences that were not scheduled, and the endorsements that were suddenly pending further review. In Washington, the withdrawal of warmth is how parties discipline their own. The deeper damage was not in any single clip or headline. It was in the pattern that Patel had laid bare. A pattern of systematic contradiction between brand and behavior that once you saw it, you could not unsee. Tax the rich, but accept free designer goods from the wealthy. And pay only when investigators force you. 100% people funded but run $1 million PAC network through shell companies your chief of staff controls. Stand with immigrants, but tell them to resist federal officers instead of giving them lawyers, increasing their legal jeopardy for the sake of a viral clip. Government accountability, but tweet false information about your own office disbursements when caught using taxpayer money for dance classes. No single item was a career ender. Politicians survive ethics findings. They survive FEC complaints. They survive bad tweets, but the accumulation of them laid out in sequence by a man who spoke like a prosecutor reading an indictment created something that was harder to survive than any individual scandal, which is a credibility gap. The distance between what she said and what she did. The distance between the dress and the bill, between the slogan and the filing, between the performance and the record. Patel did not call her a criminal. He did not call her corrupt. He did not call her a hypocrite, though the word hung in the room like smoke. He called her something worse, something more precise, something that in politics is more fatal than any accusation of crime. He called her someone who does not practice what she preaches. And he proved it with her own documents, her own words, her own ethics, committee findings, not with conspiracy theories or partisan attacks, but with the boring, devastating paperwork of public accountability. She had walked into the hearing room as the questioner. She had walked out as the subject, not because Patel had attacked her, but because he had answered her questions, and every answer was a mirror she did not want to look into. In the weeks that followed, AOC did what she always did. She fundraised on the controversy. She posted clips, her clips carefully edited, to show only her questions and not his answers. She gave interviews about political persecution and the silencing of progressive voices. The machine still worked. The donations still came. The followers still followed. But something had shifted, and everyone could feel it, even if nobody could quite name it. The shift was not in what people thought of her politics. It was in what people thought of her sincerity. And in politics, sincerity is the one thing you cannot fundraise your way back to. Kash Patel returned to the Hoover Building after the hearing. He did not hold a press conference. He did not post on social media. He went back to work. There were cartel cases to review fentanyl shipments, to intercept terrorism threats, to assess and drone incursions to monitor before the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The kind of work that does not trend on Twitter because it is not designed to. When Bongino asked him how he thought it went, Patel shrugged. She asked questions, I answered them. That is how hearings are supposed to work. That is not how her hearings usually work. Bongino said that is because nobody has ever treated her like opposing counsel before. They treat her like a celebrity. They get intimidated by the camera, by the followers, by the machine. They forget that it is a hearing room, not a studio. And in a hearing room, the person with the better preparation wins, not the person with the better Instagram. When a reporter asked him for comment the next day, he said, "Only I answered the Congresswoman's questions. I am available to answer more anytime she would like." That was it. No victory lap, no gloating, no hashtag, just a man with a binder full of receipts who had walked into someone else's performance and turned it into a trial. The receipts do not lie. That was the lesson. Not just for AOC, but for anyone who builds a brand on saying one thing while the paperwork says another. Sooner or later, someone reads the paperwork. And when they read it back to you on camera, in front of the world, no amount of performance can make the numbers disappear. She had asked him if he understood what immigrants face. He did. He had defended them in court while she was tending bar. He had represented them in holding cells while she was planning her primary campaign. He had made sure they had lawyers while she was telling them to resist officers. The question she should have asked, the question she would never ask, because it has no good answer, is simpler than the one she chose. Who actually helped them? The man with the law degree and the public defender's caseload, or the woman with the Instagram following and the free dress? She never answered.